Hey, paisans, the time has come. On the air since 2009, the independently produced, non-FCC compliant champ of video game talk podcasting. Here comes Tiger Claw Radio. Here's your host, Critical Failure.
Yes, friends, it's time for Tiger Claw Radio. I'm your host, Critical Failure. Thank you for clicking in from the internet, from far off in the galaxy. Who knows where, who knows why. We're going to talk some video games. We're going to listen to some chiptunes. So, the Battle of the Bits, chiptune resource that I kind of decided I was going to set aside for a while. They hadn't put a new album up in their Bandcamp in like a long time, a year plus. Well, Summer Chip, what is this, 13? Just hit their Bandcamp, and it's free until their next album comes out. So go grab it, unless you want to pay the $5. We'll listen to a couple of tracks off of that because it's free, and let's see what we have on the docket. We talk a little bit more about Civo, the open source clone of Civilization 2, and I played Elder Scrolls Arena for the very first time. On top of that, we've got RPG Maker Fest, came and went. I hope you got a piece of it. And Terry Kavanagh has a really good project just on the horizon. All that and more coming up next on Tiger Claw Radio. That's Summer Trip to the Arcades from Robot Meadows. If you pick up that album, the Summer Chip 13, off of Battle of the Bits, their Bandcamp page, that's going to be track number 9. All right, so let's shift gears here before we really dig into it. The past couple of weeks, we've been doing this mystery game, mystery track thing, and I think it's been a lot of fun for me, at least, to put together. I've enjoyed going through old OSTs to find games to do. So I got another one for you, so let's play that track. What do you think? You know what? I don't remember this track being as good as it is. Maybe it's because of the frustration that's tied to it. But that is our first sampling. If you already know what it is, good on you. And if you don't, we'll find out a little bit more later on. On an unrelated note, while I was putting this together, I wanted to pick Jet Crying Radio as the song, because I remember specifically back in the day, I haven't played Jet Crying Radio in a long time. There's a track that plays in the character, like in the level select screen that I remember, that was really like unique. And I went looking for it, and I didn't find it, but I did find this. It's just two like small loops that I pulled. If you look at Jet Crying Radio on the internet, like the audio rip of that game, it's like 30-second loops that are more complex with as time goes on, and each one is like the same loop but with a couple of things added. If there was ever a piece of audio that made me want to go out and play a video game, here it is, man. And it's only like 30 seconds. Let's let that play a little bit. One more quick one from Jet Crying Radio.
No.
This sounds more like the kind of music that I used to play on TCR back when we first started. Back when I was playing like ska and like punk tunes and stuff. Yeah, it's a crime to think that game is now, if you're a Steam user, it's now extinct. They removed it from Steam with no visible, audible, reason as to why. I'm glad. Is it Jet Ground Radio? Am I? Do I have that wrong? It's Jet Set Radio. Why do I remember that being Jet Grind Radio? Hang on a second. To Wikipedia I go. All right, stand by for an explanation. In Japan and Europe, the game was released as Jet Set Radio, and in North America, it was renamed Jet Grind Radio due to a trademark with the term Jet Set. However, the actual gameplay, story, and content are identical. Later, when the game was re-released for HD and modern platforms, it was standardized under the original Jet Set Radio name worldwide. Okay, that makes more sense. That's why, we have this situation where, being an older gamer, I start to have this Mandela effect where it's like, yeah, you guys remember Jet Grind Radio? And all the younger people who discovered it later in life were like, no, I don't, sir. So that's great. If you're lucky enough to have that already, dig it back up on Steam or dig it back up on your Dreamcast and play it. Otherwise, good luck getting a Steam key for $200 or whatever it costs.
Bye, Hudson!
There are dark days ahead for video games. Dark days indeed for those who have decided to play C-Evo. Actually, it's not that bad. But if you've been following the past couple weeks, I've talked about this as a clone of Civilization 2 called C-Evo. And we played it here. I played it some. And Hemrock talked about it over in the failbag section. And I realize it's a little early in the show, but he says, thanks for the in-depth explanation of Kingwin. Who would have thought that people were using Steam keys to launder money? By the way, Project Zomboid is less than $6 now. I got stomped in my first game of C-Evo, and I was setting up all the settings. Let me try that again. And that was setting all of the AIs on easy. I survived as long as I did because I was on an island. Then the AI showed up with guns while I was still using spears. How did your games go? How is Free Civ treating you? The setup for that game threw me for a loop, client versus server. A quick tutorial will be much appreciated. Alright, so let's talk about C-Evo. My games of C-Evo were not too different. I would start, and probably, I think this is probably in part due to the map choice, but I start on an island. I'm free to set things up as I go. and then when I try and leave the island or something happens, I'm way behind on the tech tree. So I get strong vibes of StarCraft playing this game, or like an RTS. You know, there's clearly a build order, and you have to understand that build order in order to keep up with the arms race or do well in the arms race. And I don't. The last game that I played, I started on the island. I had like 5 or 6 cities. Things appeared to be going great. And then I got some boats, some like low-level boats that can't travel in deep waters. And I loaded them with a couple of, some personnel to get started. And I made the jump across the island and, to another island. And I just got destroyed. As soon as contact was made, it just swept up and killed me. Also, while we're on the subject, there's a couple of issues I have with C-Evo. Particularly their version of Civilopedia, the like traditional, FAQ that's built in so you can look things up. It has weird issues where like it won't. Hold on, let me see if I can do some other static. It has weird issues where like it won't center in the screen. Like I'll try and open the Civilopedia on something, and it won't. It appears behind the windows I have open, so in order to read it, I have to like push everything to this side and then open it. And if I mess up, I can't like try a second time. The way the Civilopedia works is borked in that version of the game, which is unfortunate because that's like, how do I put this? Like basic front end functionality. Like that's the kind of thing that like if you spot it in a regular game, I would head somewhere, sound off, and hope that it would be patched. But this is like it's fairly new, I guess, but it's still, at least a year or something. So that was a bit of a bummer. But I still like the game. I still am enjoying it. I don't know how to save mid game. All I can do is quit, and it'll save as I quit. So that implies like a permadeath, which would be, pretty unpleasant for me. Because oftentimes when I'm playing a civilization of some sort, I'll save, and then immediately after saving, I'll start some war I can't win just for fun, and then roll it back. And sometimes when I do that, the branch that I take, in my head, I'm like creating an alternate like timeline, let's start a war we can't win. We'll see what happens. And that won't necessarily end the game. That might explore something interesting, like, I don't know. I still think it's good software. I still think it's good. I hope that there's some continuation in the development, and I don't know, maybe the best thing I can do to support it is like see if there's some sort of Discord or something, and then just go sound off. Hey yo, a couple of us are playing it over here on TCR. Hemrock and I are both playing this game, just so that they know, man, there's still enjoyment here. Sometimes that can be valuable enough support. So it's there, it's around. It's a little bit too big for me to put it up in the Discord, like under the straight like file repository for direct download. But I did set it up there, like with a link over to their website, which is probably probably better anyway. So yeah, C-Evo Distant Horizon. Cool game for all its flaws. I took some time to play. Let's see. It's been a little bit since I played Open General. I think that was just like a last week thing. But I did install OpenRA, and I haven't run it yet. But it created 4. Was it 4 or 3? It created just 3. 3 plus the setup file. It's been sitting there all week. 3 separate icons on my desktop: OpenRA Red Alert, OpenRA Tiberian Dawn, and OpenRA Dune 2000, which I was not expecting, but that had a bunch of stuff. So hopefully sometime this week I'll run those and get back to everyone and let you know how it went. Another game that I played that you can acquire legally for free is The Elder Scrolls 1 Arena, which I've never played. I always heard very bad things about it, that it was very broken, which is a stark contrast from Daggerfall. Daggerfall was a game I'd heard such good things about, and I had to put in some work to get into, but never Arena. So I was talking to Sean, Dorabka, the gaming beast, and he was like, "Hey man, why don't you load it up right now? I know this game very well. I can help you out with it." So I said, "All right." So I went over to, I think it was Steam. Did I have it on Steam? Let me see. Yeah, it was definitely Steam. Elder Scrolls. How long did I play this for? 68 minutes, a little over an hour. And it was more playable than I thought it would be. It was definitely a really good thing that I had just played Daggerfall in the last couple weeks, because it was difficult. It was really tough, but I was able to get used to it and enjoy it. I think the way the dungeons are laid out in Arena are actually very playable, a little bit more so than Daggerfall, even though they don't look as nice. The monsters being the monsters in the dungeons will respawn, which makes it so that it's a little bit easier to amass treasures and stuff. So yeah, apparently, and Sean and I were talking, and he said most people don't make it through that first dungeon in Arena, but I did. And I'm glad I did. It was a good experience. I want to go back and play it one more time. I'm not saying I'm going to play it all the way through. I'm not saying, oh yeah, this is going to be a game that I play from now on. But I made it through that first dungeon. I looked around in the first town, and then I found my way to another dungeon that was unrelated, right? Once you get on the surface, you can't go back to the first dungeon. So I went out and found another one. And I went in the new dungeon, and I was looking around, and things got a little too hot for me, and I fled to the surface, but I'm having difficulty making it back to somewhere safe to rest. So that's been an adventure. So that's a gameplay story that would fit well in any of the other Elder Scrolls games. So, and that's what I like about checking out the older ones is the formula that has always worked for Elder Scrolls. You know what? It's still there. I can still see it, which is pretty dope. So that's Elder Scrolls Arena, my very limited experience with it. I recommend checking it out. Let's return to our mystery game for a second, and let's hear that sound again. I got another clue for you. Well, it's not much of a clue, but let's start with this. It's clearly a Game Boy game. If you're familiar with the way the Game Boy sound chip sounds, it's very distinct. Definitely a Game Boy game. Gray cartridge Game Boy game. Not Game Boy Color. Came out before that. And here's a big one. I'm going to play... Hold on. Let's play a quick clip. So that was from... Let's see. So you would hear that on level 1 of the game. And this next track is what you hear when you reach level 3. This kind of reminds me of the game Time Lord on NES, but that's not what it is. It's a Game Boy game. Let that go for a few more seconds. Back on the website, The Next Round, you guys remember The Next Round? They're still around. It's an old blog website, but it's been inactive for a good while. Michael Smith used to run a podcast over there called MRGR Radio? MRGR, something like that. And it was his OST podcast. So it's like a chiptune podcast, but all actual OST tracks. And since he was, he's a British guy, he's got very familiar with old British computers. So I thought that was really awesome. And I hear a track like this, and it makes me want to try and revive that format a little bit. Not just an old chiptune, compilation, but old tracks from old games from old British computers, because a lot of that music was awesome. But anyway, that is the mystery game, and we'll return to that again for a final time at the end of the show. For now, though, we're just about 20 minutes in. We're about 19 minutes and 15 seconds or so. This is part of the show I like to thank the sponsors. It's a Patreon-sponsored program. Tiny little shows like this, with only a handful of people listening, only exist from support from guys like these. So as an old tradition here on TCR, I like to read their names off in a hall of distinguished gentlemen. And they are EmeraldRangers.com. Big thanks to EmeraldRangers.com, as well as Tecmo Balls and Darabka. Thank you guys so much. I hope you're enjoying the party. Okay, let's do news. Not quite as earth-shaking headlines as last week. Dino Crisis and Sims 1 and 2 dropping at the same time. But a couple of cool things. We'll start with the biggest one. Terry Kavanagh, the developer who made VVVVVV, he made Super Hexagon, both big games in my house. He made Dicey Dungeons. He's been stable for a long time. He is releasing a game on Steam and other places called Terry's Other Games. Now, I found out about Terry's work before even VVV came out. He created a top-down shmup called Self-Destruct, which I loved, and I even made a video about it in my early Tiger Claw TV days, back when I was on RetroAir TV. Great game. Oh, man. I don't know if that's going to be in this collection or not, but it's a lot of games from that era. And there's a list on Steam. So let me pop open Steam real quick, just so I can do this justice. Yeah, it's called Terry's Other Games, and it's scheduled for release on the 13th. And right now, this is being recorded on the 6th. So the 13th is what, next Thursday? Yeah, okay. So sometime next week. So what's in it? The collection includes a few reasonably substantial games, including Don't Look Back, At a Distance, Naya's Quest, Tiny Heist, and Mr. Platformer. A couple of those I recognize. Don't Look Back in particular was a little platformer that looked kind of like Atari-style graphics. It was more sprite complexity than Atari could handle, but it had a very similar Atari palette. And that was really cool. It was a little platformer that told a story without a single word of dialogue that I think was really awesome. And I also recognize Mr. Platformer, which was very similar, but instead of an Atari palette, it looked a lot more like Intellivision, and it didn't really tell a story. It was just like a fun Intellivision-themed romp. And a large number of other games that I do not recognize, which is really cool because it's a guy that's been around a long time. So definitely check out Terry's Other Games when it releases. And I don't know how much he's charging for it either, because it has a, what do you call it? It has a Steam page, but there's no listed price or anything like that. Looking at the discussions, it appears that he doesn't want to give away the full games list. Somebody asked, hang on a second. Oh, was that deleted? Yeah, somebody asked, will the Ouya FPS be included? I'm pretty excited to nab this collection when it comes out. I'm a fan of Terry's work, and I love seeing a spotlight on his more obscure stuff. I just wanted to ask if the game, a long series of letters, was going to be included. This incomprehensibly named game was a pixelated FPS game and launch title for the Ouya. It's been really curious to try it because I don't think there's a modern way to play it. Terry responded, that's a great question, and no, it's not. I'm sorry. I had to make some calls about what made the cut and what didn't, and this one didn't. However, there is something interesting about this game that did make it into the collection, and I really don't want to spoil. You'll know it when you see it. And then the follow-up question, well, hold on, how many games are in it exactly? At a glance, the store page makes it look like you picked 10. And Terry responded, don't worry about it. I love that response. Don't worry about it. So yeah, that's coming out next week. So big thanks to Terry Kavanagh for putting that together. I'm pretty psyched to play that one actually. Some other stuff going on. I checked out the ROM hacking sites, romhacking.net. Their big story, which came out at the end of January, is Shining Force 2 Return to Grands. There's a Shining Force 2 rebalance hack that looks interesting. It is a remastered and rebalanced version of the game, and the changes are as follows. Dialogue in the main game has been vastly reworked. 40% of all text passages have been altered, replacing the oftentimes bland writing of the original. Most of the not-so-appealing graphics of the vanilla SF2 have been improved or replaced, such as the battle sprites of the Vicars and Archers. Difficulty has been reworked by tweaking enemy stats, skills, numbers on the battlefield. Battles will usually appear familiar, but often play out quite differently thanks to new abilities, magic spells, and some surprises. party members have been greatly rebalanced as to make characters useful in their respective titles. E.g., Kiwi is now a useful companion. Peter is no longer the one-man army from before. Karna is no longer strictly superior to Sarah. Gameplay-wise, the hack will require you to play more tactful, careful positioning, and well-thought-out. A comparison of your party are more important than in the original game. So there you go. If you're into Shining Force 2, which was a great game, there is a bit of a remake / rebalance. And that article came from romhacking.net. And I switched over to RomHack Plaza, which is an awesome site. And their latest was published this morning. Let's Go Rider Kick, Kamen Rider SD, The Ambitions of Grand Shocker for the SNES Famicom is out. Grand Shocker has appeared to wreak havoc all over Japan, and it's up to SD Kamen Riders to put an end to their madness. The third NES FDS Kamen Rider game now has an English translation patch. Play with one of the 3 Kamen Rider teams as they travel all across Japan to stop Grand Shocker from its original world conquest. And that one is on RomHack Plaza, which is still functioning with downloads and all. And one thing I like about RomHack Plaza is they have an integrated RomHack patcher. So yes, you're just downloading the patch, but right there on the same page, you can upload your copy of the Japanese ROM, and then it'll throw on that English patch, and then boom, you're good to go, which is really sweet. And I think that's the news. I also checked out, RPGmaker.net is down, which sucks, even though it's old and not many people use it anymore. I went to RPGmaker.net to see if there's anything cool on the RPG Maker front, and I got nothing. That's down. So, also, it's probably already over by the time you're listening to this, but by this past week, the RPG Maker Festival, RPG Maker Fest, has happened on Steam. And part of that annual event that they did was RPG Maker VX Ace, which is 3 versions old now, rather, was free for a short period of time. And that's a game that it's regular priced at $70. And I think I bought mine. I can't remember how I came across mine. Did I buy it or Sean, did you buy it for me? I think Sean might have actually bought this for me. But this was back when, you were really lucky if it went on sale for $20. So now it's free. So this was one I was tapping the shoulders of all my buddies. Hey man, you got this, right? This one's worth getting. So RPG Maker VX Ace was indeed free.
All right, boys and girls, let's go back to Summer Chip 13, which is free on the Bandcamp account for battleofthebits.org. We're going to play another track. More when we come back. You're listening to Tiger Claw Radio. That's Cleater with Heatwave Surfer. Check 29 off of that album if you decide to go get yourself a copy while it's still free. We had some fun on the Discord this past week. Hang on a second. There we go. Been playing pinball, right? I've been into... Okay, well, let me back up a step. On my older computer, right? I have this old laptop from a long time ago. I stopped using it in 2016 when I finally built my first computer. And it was... But prior to 2016, when I used it a lot, it was like a lot of the early days of TCR came off of that laptop. So it was a good time, and it has a functioning CD-ROM drive on it, which they don't put in laptops anymore. And it runs, it has a CD-ROM drive, and it runs Windows 7. So not as old as XP or 98, whatever, but Windows 7. And Windows 7 is old enough that some, not all, but some old CD-ROM games will work on it. So I got a bunch of CD-ROM games out that I have hanging around, and I've been buying them off of eBay, and not just buying them off of eBay, but my wife and I, we have a date night that we do once a week, and sometimes we head to the used bookstore, and at the used bookstore they have these CDs, these old CD-ROM games, not complete in box, that's pretty rare, but just the CDs, we see them commonly for like $2 and $3 a piece. And it reminded me of when I first got into like retro gaming. And Hemrock and I have talked about this in the past, but back in 2007 and 2008, around that time, an NES game was like $2. Do you know what I mean? And so people would get into retro gaming because it was low cost gaming, right? Nostalgia was the thing, but it was second. What was more important was if you had $20, you could get a stack of new games and play all night. And it hasn't really been like that in a long time. And I remember talking to Hemrock, and we were kind of asking each other, well, what's the point at this point? If you got to spend $50 or $60 or whatever it costs for a copy of Contra, is that really the way to go anymore? And getting into these old CD-ROM games, it really reminded me of that era where you could go to the thrift store, and there would be some NES games that you could just get for like $1 or $2 or whatever it was, Even like, I guess it's weird to think TCR has been on the air this long, but I remember buying at the thrift store a Sega Master System game complete in box. It was called Black Belt. So not a renowned Sega Master System game, but I remember thinking, hey, I know a YouTuber who really likes these. I'm going to buy this, and I'm going to mail it to them. And I did. And you know why I did that? Because at the time, you could get something like that for only $1, and you could mail it for only a couple of dollars. And so playing these old CD-ROM games really opened up. I was like I can explore all these types of games for super cheap again. And it also, there's something special about having my laptop and just having stacks and stacks of CD-ROMs and just hot swapping them back and forth. And I think I mentioned this in the past couple of weeks, but of the games that I've installed, and a lot of strategy games, strategy was really big at the time. And a lot of the games I installed, my favorite right now is Pinball Thrill Ride, Ultra 3D Pinball from Sierra, and they had several of them, but the one I have is Thrill Ride. And I bought that game at, I guess you'd call it a swap meet that I went to with Vintage Video Game Geek. I went there with, we met, and it was in West Virginia, so I had to drive quite a bit. I live in Maryland, and this thing was in West Virginia. And I met him there, and I had my son with me, who was 2 at the time, who is now 15. And the thing has been that CD-ROM has been amongst my belongings, just unplayed ever since then. So that's a lot of years. And I got it out, and it just turned me back on to pinball. I used to be a really big pinball guy. And as a result of that, I was talking to Sean, Darabka, the Gaming Beast, Beastcast, that guy. He's the other big time, like old school PC guy. Him and Hemrock, I think, are the most knowledgeable and into old PC games. So he got into, we started going back and forth with screenshots of old pinball games. And we made this agreement. He played every single table in the Epic Pinball Pack, which you can get off of GOG now. It used to be real big back in the in Windows 95, Windows 98, around that time. Everybody had Epic Pinball. And he played every table and gave his opinion on each one on Discord. And in return, I'm going to play every table in the Pinball Dreams pack, which I think is 7 different tables. So he did the MS-DOS one, and I'm doing like the MS-DOS version, like the Amiga one. Pinball Dreams, Pinball Illusions, all that stuff. You can get that off of GOG under the name Pinball Gold. It is the Pinball Gold pack, which totes, like, it boasts having 40 tables in it, which I don't think is true. But I'm going to play every table in that pack and give my opinion. I have a little hardback book that I write scores in, so that's been pretty great. So if you head over to the Discord in the High Scores channel, that is why there are so many posts of Darabka giving his high score / benchmark score plus a little 2-sentence opinion on every single table in the Epic Pinball set, which was really cool to read, by the way. So big thanks to Darabka for doing that. All right, I've got one more chiptune that I want to play off of Summer Chip 13, and I know I don't usually go this chiptune heavy, but this one's only a minute and a half. This is called Patience Pays in Dividends from Tristendo. It's track 35 off of Summer Chip 8. You're listening to Tiger Claw Radio. Hey gang, just a quick reminder that the new episodes come out on EmeraldRangers.com first, and it lasts about 1 week. So if you're listening to this on YouTube, if this just came out on YouTube and that's where you're listening to it, that means this is a week old and the new episode is already out over on EmeraldRangers.com. Big thanks to those guys for keeping us alive. All right, boys and girls, let's go back to our mystery track for the final time. Are you enough of a Game Boy guy to know this track? I feel like people who played the Game Boy in its heyday are going to have an unfair advantage here. It does have a version on Steam which came out only a couple of years ago, and it was not heard of in any of the time between. So, early 90s Game Boy game, late 20 or early 2020s Steam game, and nothing in between. All right, what's the name of the game? Let's hear that title screen music first. Alright, so the name of the game, if I can pronounce this right, is Haikanyo Alien. And if you remember on the Game Boy, it had 2 modes. It had a classic 80s arcade mode, and it had its story mode. And the tracks you were hearing are from the updated new mode. And again, it did have a Steam game that came out a lot later, and I actually just recently got that, probably a month or 2 ago. But in my opinion, it's a little bit more expensive than I think it's worth. I guess not anymore. Now it's $14, which makes sense. But it's weighted more towards like the 80s arcade mode than the newer mode that that the Game Boy version had. So really great game, and I remember specifically that it showed up in a lot of people's collections for some reason, and it might just be anecdotal evidence, my little bubble or whatnot, but I seem to remember that everybody had this game. But I don't really remember a whole lot of other people playing it. It was like people would show you their collection, and it would be like the couple of games that they were really into, and then a few like fluff games on top of that. And the fluff games would be things like Bugs Bunny or maybe Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, which is a good little game on the Game Boy, but just you probably pick it up at a used toy store or something like that, a thrift store, and it would just sit. And Hyanko Alien, however you pronounce that, was always one of those games. And there it is. I looked that game up. I was thinking about it, and I don't remember the background music going that hard. I actually really like those tracks. Very difficult game, too. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there's nothing in the fail bag this week. So you know what that sound means. We're going to go ahead and wrap things up. And whatever it is you got going on, I really hope it goes well for you, And as you face this week and all the challenges ahead, I want you to know that I'm rooting for you. I really am. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you next week.